Everybody's got a price, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a pod, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a price.
What's up, everybody? It's Marcus D'Angelo. We are back for another episode of Everybody's Got a Pod. And of course, I am joined by the $1 million man himself, the master of the $1 million dream, Hall of Famer, Ted DiBiase. Ted, what's going on, man?
Marcus, it's you, buddy. You know, it's kind of like, it's hard to say. It's kind of like I've been kind of sad recently, you know, with all the stuff going on with, with Vince. That's heart-wrenching, really. I don't know. It's kind of like it's a double-edged sword there. I mean, one part of me is, I'm so, if it hadn't been for Vince, where wrestling has gone would have never happened.
Right.
By the same token, when you look at some of the things that, he's been accused of doing, I don't know. It's just sad. I can't say it any other way. It's just sad. It makes me wonder, what are his children thinking?
Yeah.
When they read that stuff. It's just sad, man.
I mean, here's the thing too, is like, we don't really think about all the people that this impacts. So yes, Vince's children, I know he's been estranged from his wife for a while, but still his wife has got to read that. Her last name is still McMahon, so she's dealing with it. But how about his grandchildren? Like, he just had a grandson who made some national news because he looks just like Vince and he's playing college football. And, a kid was saying like, oh yeah, one day I'd love to take over the WWE. And now there's that news. And it's like, all of a sudden looking like Vince McMahon, maybe not a great thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as you said, it's hard to come to terms with the whole thing because it's, here's a guy who provided us with many, many years of entertainment, some of these incredible, indelible moments. Guys like you and Ted and Jake and Hacksaw and other guys I work with, he provided you guys with an income, a way to feed your families. And so, but then you hear all this awful stuff and it's like, man, it's hard to come to terms with, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is, and it's, I don't know. It's just, it leaves me speechless. It's kind of like, the $1 million man is going to say this. There are some things money can't buy, and money cannot buy integrity.
Man, the $1 million man saying that resonates. Certainly. Yeah, certainly puts things into perspective. And Ted, that'll bring us to our notes. I'm ready to jump into this subject. There's certainly a lot to discuss. It's February 1997 in WCW. And the first thing I've got to talk to you about is that the February 3rd edition of The Observer reports that Randy Savage has officially re-signed with the company for a limited amount of dates and $1 million per year. Ted, did you ever imagine when you were breaking into wrestling that anyone would be getting paid that kind of money?
No.
How could you, right?
Yeah. And it's kind of like the old NFL and the new NFL.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of, like I'm sure there's a lot of very old football players who were still alive, maybe not too many of them, but like, back when the whole thing started and talk about what they were getting paid. And, when football season's over, it wasn't like they could live off of what they had earned. They had to go get a job.
Right.
Or they had to work another job. Well, that's the same thing with wrestling. It's kind of like that kind of money was almost unheard of,
It's just crazy because, as a kid, I'm watching and I just assume that everybody on screen is a millionaire. I'm like, well, there's an action figure of this guy. Of course he's a millionaire. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
then it's like you find out years later that some guy's just working like a regular job.
yeah,
So it's hard to make a full-time living in wrestling for like decades upon decades, like
yeah,
you and Jim and so many others did, right?
yeah. And the toll it took on our bodies. I mean, by the grace of God, it's like I, I haven't had any real serious injuries in terms. I had um, and this showed up years later. This is like the doctor, the way he described it. He says, what's the basic bump you took, Ted? And I said, from my feet to my back. And so he says, every time you hit that mat, he says, because what I had done is I had herniated 2 discs in my neck.
Hmm.
And the whole thing there, that like when you take a bump as a wrestler, you always do this. You tuck your chin, and it becomes second nature. Because you don't want to hit the mat and knock yourself out. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so, but he said, time after time after time after time, he says, it affect, so I had 2 discs, I think, the disc between C5 and C6, those 2 discs, I had those, they take them out and they replace them with something that's, artificial, but and it's fused. But I have found out there are a lot of guys like me that have had the same surgery.
Oh yeah.
I think Jake had it.
Yes, sir. He did, and a number of other guys that I've heard about have
Yeah,
dealt with this with herniated discs in their neck, and I'm sure
yeah,
you're right. It probably has everything to do with bumping. And here's
yeah,
the thing: is everybody has to take bumps, including these guys who then had to go on and get shoot jobs, as they call them.
yeah,
Working security or doing whatever. It's like, man, a lot of very fortunate folks have managed to make a living in wrestling, for their whole lives and not
yeah,
have to do that. So, man, God bless you guys. But when you hear this figure from Savage that he's making this amount of money. Now, for context, they also had the Slim Jim deal as a result of getting Savage, which brought them, it was something like $500,000 or $600,000 a year. So really, WCW is paying Savage whatever, it's $500,000 or $400,000 a year. So, but still, he's making $1 million a year, so it's an awful lot of money. Like when you hear a figure like that, is there a piece of you that's like, ah, damn, I should have kept working? Or are you in a comfortable enough position that you're satisfied making what you're making?
Well, I never made that much, but I I wasn't too far off. But by the same token, it's um, by the grace of God, I made enough money, and the other thing I did is I saved my money.
Mm.
A lot of guys, it's kind of like, I remember this guy's name his name is Bill Dromo, old wrestler. You'd probably have to look him up. He was, I had this conversation with him in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in a Waffle House
Mm.
late at night, like at like 2 o'clock in the morning after a show. And I was very young at the time. I had just started. I think it was like the first summer I worked in 1975. And he said that to me. He says, "Kid, if you don't remember anything else I tell you, remember this: it's not how much you make, it's how much you save."
Yeah.
He says, "There's a lot of people who've made great money in our business, and they blew it all. With the wild living, and what's the song? How does Rick sing the song?"
What is it like? Limo riding and jet flying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Was that what you mean, Rick?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, and I don't, and again, Rick's my friend. I love him to death. I don't know how, and obviously he made very good money. Uh, you know, but I would venture to say if Rick could go back now and go, golly, man, maybe I should have saved some more. But I mean, and I don't know how well off he is. I mean, obviously he's not having to go out and find a job. So he did very well, but he he was notorious for spending a tremendous amount of money in the bar.
The old thing with Rick was he would always tell people, I've spent more money on spilled liquor than you made in a year. And some people have like done the math on that and said, like, it might be true, because he was apparently buying shots for the whole bar and like throwing some of the shots over his shoulder.
Oh yeah.
So man, that's a man that is, if nothing else, he's lived a hell of a life.
Yeah.
Hey,
And to Rick's credit, Rick was one hell of a worker. Absolutely.
yes, he was.
Nobody could take that from me. He and I never we worked a few times, but man, I would have loved to have been able to just work a whole program with him.
There's footage out there that I saw recently of you and he working in Mid-South, but yeah, like you guys, to your point, you guys never really got a full-blown program with some storytelling and stuff. It was just a match. So man, could have been something. But yeah, it's funny to hear that you learned that lesson in the Waffle House. It just goes to show that really wonderful things happen in Waffle House every time you go in there.
Yeah.
The business is really, really hot here, and so are merch sales. This SuperBrawl pay-per-view that's coming up this month, for advances, fans are actually camping out in San Francisco, which Meltzer says he never even saw back when the WWF was in its prime run with Hogan. And WCW is also apparently raising the prices of NWO t-shirts at this time because they were selling so well. Ted, I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Were you seeing any of the money from the merch sales for NWO stuff?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think that you guys were all just on guaranteed contracts, and that what you make is what you make. But man, it's an absolute fortune was made on those NWO shirts.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing too. I game at the very beginning. When I was there when Hulk Hogan was still the guy. Mm-hmm. So this is years later, and having come out of having no contract, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To having to sign a contract. But, there at the beginning, it was almost like, you didn't have anything to bargain with. You know what I'm saying? There's no way back then you could go, okay, Vince, I'd be happy to wrestle for you, but you're going to call me the $1 Million Man. That's how much money I want.
Right.
And
right.
He probably showed me the door.
That was the old way of the business, and it was the accepted standard. But yeah, I mean, standards changed with WCW offering guaranteed contracts, and a lot of people
see that's the thing, is that WCW comes along, and now there's competition.
Yep,
that's the difference. And I can't remember exactly what my contract was for.
I remember it, if you don't mind me saying it here on the podcast.
Okay.
You signed a 3-year deal, and I think it grew every year. So I want to say that it started at 200. The next year you're at 300. The next year you're at 400. I think it was something like that, wasn't it?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So pretty good deal on guaranteed money.
Well, yeah. I mean, and it's totally guaranteed. In other words, whether I was there or I wasn't, and it was almost like a no cut deal. Even if they did, and this basically happened for me, when I went to work there, and of course, Eric Bischoff, nice guy. But back then, I mean, Eric Bischoff, he didn't know squat about wrestling, and he's the boss. So he's dependent on all these wrestlers, basically, to help him book the whole show. It was crazy. I mean, some of those meetings were insane. But you know, he was being able to offer the money to the guys because of Turner.
Yep. Vince at that time was still just a millionaire, and he was offering opportunity as opposed to guaranteed money. He's up against a billionaire who's offering guaranteed money. I'll tell you who's going to win that one every single time. It's
Yeah.
always people are. I'm sure everybody was looking to go and ring that cash register, man.
Yeah.
Well, so this whole thing about merch, though, it raises an interesting question in my mind. When you were in the WWF, I know that you would receive payouts on your action figures, but you didn't really have T-shirts. You were heel, right? So,
I don't think I had any T-shirts, and again, I still get a quarterly royalties check. Because they keep coming out with, it's like I haven't had tights on for 30 years, right? And they're still they have these new action figures that I see that the kids will bring and have me sign. But where most of us made the most money was it's on the form in your, when you get your royalties check and it lists, and that's the other thing, the percentages that we got. Oh gosh,
they were small,
ridiculously small. And but anyway, I still quarterly royalty check, and most of the money was made for most of us was what they call electronics or the video games. The video games are the things that brought in the most money.
It's I'm sure that you were making a fair amount of added money with action figures. The nice thing about being the top heel in the company is that when they make an action figure of you, the people want a heel for their Hulk Hogan figure to beat up on. So it's like
exactly,
it's a good spot for you to be in. However, again, you didn't really have any T-shirts, and it does make me wonder: did the lack of merchandise back in your WWF days, did it ever make you kind of see like the kind of money these guys were pulling in and say like, I kind of want to turn babyface so I can make some of that damn, get some more merch and make some of those royalty money.
I don't know if I ever gave it too much thought.
No.
I mean, I was being paid well. So, and, again, the other thing with the $1 Million Man character was, first class, airfare, limousines, all of that stuff.
Hard to argue with that.
And it's a tough job. Somebody had to do it because Hulk and Andre were the only other two people that got that kind of treatment.
Pretty good spot.
And of course, mine didn't last forever, either. So I mean, but it was good while it lasted. That's for sure.
And some guys never get it. So the fact that you had it even temporarily is incredible.
Yeah.
So it's also reported at this time that Dennis Rodman was negotiating with the WWF, but representatives wanted to give WCW a chance to match the offer, which of course WCW is going to. At the same time, Kevin Green, who's playing for the Carolina Panthers, has been expressing interest in returning to WCW. Ted, did you get much time around either Rodman or Kevin Green when they were coming in and out of the company?
No.
Never.
Nah. I wasn't interested.
It's interesting because you're like Rodman's in the NWO, so are you. So like you're around him, but it's just like you were unimpressed with him overall.
Yeah.
Well, generally speaking, what do you think of these types of crossovers in wrestling? Is it good for it to have that kind of exposure, or bad because the wrestlers always have to put the shine on the quote unquote real athletes?
Marcus, I don't know. It's kind of like it's a novelty. They're only going to be there for a short time, and when the novelties, once you've spent it, and then you got to find another novelty to replace it.
Well, look, we're not wasting any time this week. Before we get into our first clip, the Steiner brothers were forced to give back the WCW tag team titles the night after Sold Out because Bischoff said that Randy Anderson wasn't a sanctioned referee. But that's not quite enough for Hall, Nash, and Six. Six would film as the three tailed the Steiner brothers on the way to the next town, which brings us to this crazy clip.
I want to get too close. their backs, what they're up to.
Why do you say we give them a little tap ski in Nairobi?
I mean, it'd be polite to say hello.
Hey, what do you think? You think they're looking for a Super 8 or a budgetel or something to check
Motel
into?
6.
Motel 6 split into twin.
Yeah.
No, double heel. They'll get
No,
somebody
they're
else.
a single with a cot.
This is how you come to complete stop, boys.
That was
Yes.
right. Check both ways. Proceed when clear.
Let's see what they're
Say a little
about.
hello.
What
do you say, boys?
I dare you.
Dare me?
I dare you. Ooh, I dare you. I dare you. Just a little hello. Just a little hello.
Hi, guys.
Whoa, how you doing?
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
Nice comeback.
nice shot! Nice shot!
Ooh.
Wow!
Good
It's a rhythm.
comeback.
Took
Get
the
him.
moment
Get
off.
him. Get him again.
Get him! Woo! Hey, stop it! You want it? Whoa! Oh, man!
Turn it off.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, should we stop?
Oh, man. Turn it off. Oh, man. Anybody around? Let's go.
All right, so Ted, where are you at on attempted murder for a wrestling angle?
Wow. I've never seen that. Man, Marcus, you're great. You pull up stuff I never knew happened. I never knew that happened.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, obviously they didn't really mean to flip the card.
Oh no, that was the whole thing. So if you saw, there's like a little bit of a jostle of the camera there at the end of it, and that's when they cut in the film. Hogan was buddies with a stunt driver that they hired, and they had the stunt driver in the car that made it flip. So it was, but it looked good. It looked real, in real time watching it. It's like, oh my God, they made him crash.
It looked real to me. Man.
So it looked good, but it's like, apparently there was a lot of blowback, and I'm actually not that surprised that you never saw this or don't really remember it, because they showed it once on TV, then never brought it up again because there was so much blowback from the audiences as a result of it that they just couldn't pursue it anymore. But yeah, that's something that people still point to all these years later. Like, hey, remember when they were so angry about the tag team titles, they tried to kill the Steiner brothers?
Oh.
I mean, in all seriousness, pretty well done. But do you think that this kind of thing is too far, too silly, or a pretty good piece of business?
Oh gosh, I don't know. To me, it all it's got to all come back to the performance in the ring. Now you shoot at angle again. That was pretty impressive. Like, wow, that they would go to those lengths, but I guess my question would be, what was the payoff? Did they get the payoff that they expected for what it cost them to, total that car and do that piece? You know what I'm saying?
Interestingly, I don't think the world would ever quite find out if the payoff or if the juice was worth the squeeze, so to speak, because I think that the teams, it was Hall and Nash were set to meet the Steiners. I think it was going to be Spring Stampede 97. And unfortunately, just before Spring Stampede, Scott Hall went into rehab. And so it wound up just being a singles match between Kevin Nash and Rick Steiner. And it was just like kind of deflated the whole thing. So to your point, they go to all this trouble. They hire a stunt driver. They film all this. They edited it up really well. And then I don't think we ever quite got a real payoff.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Frustrating, but man, it's a lot of resources being used there in WCW at the time. And you're right, I think it looked pretty good. And for me, I'm like, okay, that's good, entertaining TV. I'm a grown man. There's probably some children watching that thinking that their heroes, the Steiner brothers, possibly died in a car accident.
Yeah. So
it makes you think. Another piece of news regarding Hall and Nash is that apparently their old clique buddy Shawn Michaels reached out to Hall at around this time, asking if there might be a spot for him in WCW. And for frame of reference, this is the WWF champion at the time calling to see if he could jump over to WCW. But rumor has it that he'll be dropping the belt back to Bret Hart coming up at WrestleMania 13, and he doesn't want to take the loss to his real-life rival, despite the fact that Hart did him the favor the year prior. He's also apparently dealing with a knee injury, but the severity of that injury has been disputed for years. Sean will instead opt to walk away from the WWF at this time, even though he remains under contract with them. So, Ted, I know this is a WCW episode, but this is a clip and a promo that has now become infamous in wrestling, and I'd be willing to bet that you've never seen it or heard of it. Let's have a look at Sean's promo before he legitimately would step away from the WWF for a little bit.
The schedule over the last year I took on because I didn't feel like I could say no. I wanted to do everything. I wanted to enjoy my life as a champion. I wanted to ride in Lear jets, and I wanted to ride in limousines, and I wanted to be on TV shows, and I wanted to do autograph sessions, and I got to do every bit of that. And if nothing else, I have all of that to take with me. But again, and I know right now we're in the middle of a time where toughness is real big here in the World Wrestling Federation. And unfortunately, all I've got right now for you is a lot of sorrow, a lot of tears, and a lot of emotion. I don't have any toughness for anybody. So I guess, you know, here you go. Here's your belt. And what I'm going to do is go back home and see what's left for me, whether it be in this ring, whether it be out of this ring. I know that over the last several months, I've lost a lot of things, and one of them has been my smile. And I know it doesn't mean a whole lot to everybody else, but it means a lot to me. So I have to go back and fix myself and take care of myself. And I have to go back and I have to find my smile, because somewhere along the line, I lost it.
Okay, there you have it. Shawn Michaels loses his smile and goes home. It's a tearful promo. He's willfully giving up the WWF Championship, admitting to not being a tough guy. Straight out of the Bill Watts playbook, right, Ted?
Well,
not quite, right?
I never saw that.
I had a feeling, because you're on the other channel. I know you're not watching this stuff, but man, everybody calls that the Sean loses his smile promo. And it like a lot of people point to it as kind of like a slap in the face to the business. I don't know. You know, in seriousness, I know that you weren't there, but neither were most of the fans who remark on this situation and voice their opinions one way or another. So
okay,
go ahead.
I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I guess, was this promo a shoot?
It was. That was real life. Shawn Michaels was really saying, like, couldn't do it anymore. He was citing the knee injury.
But okay, but I guess the other question I would have was, did Vince McMahon, who was holding the microphone, know that Shawn was going to say those things?
Yep. So they had a conversation ahead of time where Shawn was saying, "Hey, look, you know, my knee is in rough shape." But you know, the thing is that again, WrestleMania 13 is right around the corner, and Shawn is expected to drop this belt to Bret Hart after Bret did the favor for him at WrestleMania 12.
Right.
And everybody knows that Shawn does not like Bret, and Bret does not like Shawn. And now it's his turn to do a little back and forth. And he, you know, the time is coming up and he's like, "Oh boy, this knee injury. Plus I'm a little bit depressed. The business, you know, it's been hard miles on me. I think I need to step away." And he gives up the belt.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, so outside looking into it, again, you're not there. Do you think that the position of WWF champion is just too much pressure for some folks? Or do you think that Shawn Michaels during this time was maybe not in the right headspace?
Well, you know, again, I don't know what Shawn what he was saying. It sounded like it, you know, it didn't sound like a promo. It sounded like it was coming straight from his heart.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I think that part of it might have been very, very real. I mean, to be in the position he was in. Now, here's a guy that's carrying the WWE World Championship, and he's going to give it up. Wow.
Crazy, isn't it?
You know, crazy. I mean, you know, making the money that goes along with that.
Shawn
Yeah,
Michaels is apparently making something like 750 grand a year and probably more after merch sales and whatnot at this time. And he's saying, you know what, I'm going to walk away from it. So something was going on, whether that be that he just wanted to wait until after WrestleMania come back, which is what happened. He would come back following WrestleMania 13. So it does kind of feel like, hey, look, he doesn't like Bret Hart. This is a good excuse. His knee was legitimately injured, maybe not as bad as he's letting on.
yeah,
I'm just gonna step away. Oh, WrestleMania 13's over, and I don't have to do the job. Hey, I'm back. That's at least been like the kind of the opinion of fans. Again, I wasn't there, you weren't there, we don't know, but
yeah,
just yeah, I want to get your opinion on this, just from kind of an outside looking in thing, because
yeah,
we hear fan opinions all the time, but you're one of the guys that was
yeah. And of course, and I didn't know that. See, I tried to, I went out of my way to stay away from the controversies.
smart.
I tried to get along with everybody. And, of course, the new Shawn Michaels, the Shawn Michaels who has, now given his heart to Jesus Christ and is a very strong Christian, that's the Shawn I know today and who I admire very much.
Very different man.
Very different man. And, uh, and he'd be the first guy to tell you, like I could see where nobody liked who I was.
He's self-aware. You've got to give him that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, another question, then we'll let go of the subject of Shawn here losing his smile. I think I know the answer to this, but I think it's still worth asking. Have you ever disliked anyone in wrestling enough to refuse to put them over?
No.
Never.
No. I can't think of anybody that I had, it was like I got along with everybody. And I stayed away from the, I don't know how I managed to do that. I mean, I pretty much got along with everybody, and it's kind of like Andre. If Andre liked you, you knew it.
Mm-hmm.
And if Andre didn't like you, chances are you were going to know that too. But there wasn't any, there wasn't anybody in wrestling that I just loathed, that I just, dirtbag. I don't want to have anything to do with them.
Yeah, we've talked a number of times about you disliking the Ultimate Warrior or Buzz Sawyer, or like plenty of guys along the way. However,
and again, like you said, the Ultimate Warrior is the one person I've worked with him maybe one time and had to put him over, and I hated it.
but despite the fact that you didn't like him, you were a businessman and you put him
Yeah,
over. And same
absolutely.
thing with other guys along the way. And that's what I hear Jake say all the time is like, man, there have been a lot of guys I've stepped into the ring with and I didn't like, but I'll let anybody pin me because it's a job. That's all there is to it. It's your job.
Yeah.
Okay, we can get back to WCW and SuperBrawl at the Cow Palace in San Francisco. It draws 13,000 fans for a gate of $192,000 plus another $93,000 in merch. Ted, when you think about the Cow Palace, do any particular matches or events stand out for you personally?
Oh, wow.
I'm sure you've been there a lot.
Yeah, I was there a lot, and I can't, I just can't think of any one match, but obviously we always looked forward to going there because, that's basically San Francisco, and those crowds were always good. I mean, they weren't always through the roof, but they were always good. So it was, you were always going to make good money there.
Well, here in San Francisco, the story is that Piper has locked himself in Alcatraz for a week in order to get himself in the frame of mind to face Hogan at SuperBrawl. Does this ring a bell for you at all, Ted?
Yeah.
Well, just in case you need a little reminder about it, it's going to be our final clip this week. It's some pretty wild shit as we see Roddy Piper escape Alcatraz ahead of the big pay-per-view.
I know my way. You see, it's time to pay the piper now. I didn't spend 7 days in hell for nothing. And Hogan, you're an extinction. You're an endangered species. Now get that thing out of my face. Goodbye! San Francisco! Hogan, I be your date! Sharks.
Okay.
I loved Roddy. He really was a great guy.
What a character, man.
And he was a hell of a worker.
Yeah, great
Yeah.
worker, knew how to get over, knew how to cut a promo, and knew how to act. Not
Oh,
bad
yeah.
acting there. Did you watch any of his
I,
films?
yeah, I never saw that before.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
I'm glad I
Marcus,
can
you're
introduce you to
amazing. It's like I'm going, gosh, did I miss half of my career or what?
In fairness, you probably heard about it, but it's like you guys aren't watching, like the pre-show vignettes or anything like that. You're backstage getting ready or doing whatever. Yeah, so it's just really funny. I'm glad I can introduce you to the strange shit that happened in WCW and elsewhere. But I'm curious. You're watching it with fresh eyes, Ted, and you've got more knowledge than just about anybody I know when it comes to wrestling. Do you think this was a good way to set up a big fight between Hogan and Piper, or too cheesy, or what are your thoughts on this sort of thing?
Well, I mean, if you knew Roddy Piper and his character and you saw some of the other interviews and the way he did his interviews, then you wouldn't be all that surprised by that. So I mean, I thought I kind of liked it. although back then I never saw it.
Well, it's good. You got fresh eyes.
Well, I mean, obviously it worked because we draw a hell of a house.
Dude, huge house, huge reaction, and man, overall the pay-per-view is pretty well received. One of the top matches from the Observer standpoint is a lucha style match. Conan, La Parca, and Villano 4 take on Juventud Guerrera, Super Calo, and Ciclope. These matches were normally how nitros and pay-per-views would get kicked off because Bischoff has said that he wanted to kind of capture the audience's attention right away with some high-flying, entertaining car crash type matches. Ted, what did you think of the lucha influence on the American product at this time?
I'll be honest with you. I don't know how the fans took it. I mean, again, I'm old school, and to me, lucha is like, tell me a story. Don't just go in the ring and bounce around the ring like a ping pong ball and just high spot after high spot after high spot. The high spots that the guys did were impressive, but they don't mean anything. It's just one bump, another bump, this way, that way. And then all of a sudden somebody goes down after the 25th backdrop or whatever it is and gets beat.
Yeah.
So I've never been one that was much into lucha. I mean, and if you watched, I mean, like, okay, Chavo Guerrero, Chavo Jr., the Guerreros didn't wrestle like that.
They were a whole other style of lucha. Yeah.
Well, they were our style.
Yes.
there was like, tell the story, like it's kind of like, it's kind of like you do all this, like if you just go out and do a bunch of bumps, bump, 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 bump. Yeah, well, it doesn't mean anything. But if you tell a story and then at some point you take this enormous bump over the top rope and you hit the floor and it takes you a while to get up, and the referees count and everything, and you manage to get back in the ring and everything. Now, and you're the baby face. Now the people are cheering you on. They're wanting to see you get back up to your feet and you make a slow, methodical comeback. The guy comes to get you and you punch him in the gut and he bends over and you get him and you climb out and you pull yourself up to the ropes and here he comes again, and he actually gets you and he shoots you in, but you duck and you hit him with something else and then you just explode.
See,
you can see that, you can visualize that as I'm telling the story. Well, that you visualize that. But if two guys go in the ring and they go bing, 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 it's like I couldn't stand it.
Mm-hmm.
I was never, I was impressed by the stuff they could do, but I was never impressed with their work because it was senseless to me.
Impressive looking moves, but unimpressive storytelling.
It's like, it's just bing, 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 bing. It's like a bunch of flying ants.
Well, let's get to the main event. Piper and Hogan are squaring off, and Piper's going to put Hogan to sleep, but the match will be restarted because Hogan's feet were moved under the ropes by Randy Savage. And then Savage is going to give Hogan brass knucks, which Hulk will use for the win, and Macho Man is officially part of the NWO. The two will beat on Piper as the show wraps up. So, Ted, Randy Savage is joining the NWO here. The big argument here is that WCW was not only signing a lot of guys who were of advanced age, but they were also making them the feature act on pay-per-view and paying them the most money, despite the fact that they hardly had to work. I can see where that would upset a lot of folks, but I also see that WCW is using established names to draw crowds, as clearly they did here in San Francisco. And, they're trying to recoup all the money that they're spending on guys like Hogan and Savage. So was it ultimately a big mistake, do you think, for WCW not to push younger talents more? Or do you feel that it was really the only card they had to play at the time?
Well, I think it's the only card they had to play at the time because there wasn't really anybody there. There was no Pat Patterson. Any one of a number of guys who, you got a bunch of wrestlers and you got a bunch. Okay, you got Hogan, you got Savage, and you got Hall and Nash. And everybody's they're fighting for a position. That's basically what they're doing. And I was so glad that I was a manager by this time in the game. Because and I didn't have to worry about that. Let them do what they want to do. What I knew is that for the first time in my life, I had a 3-year no cut contract, and here's what happened. I told them, I said, look, I said, I'm a heel manager. But I've become a man of faith, and I'm making a lot of appearances on Christian television, sharing my story. I said, you might think about turning me baby face in some way, and I can't remember even how they did it, but they did some deal where I ended up with the Steiner brothers, and I'm their manager, and that's how it was kind of like. And that's all I had to show. All I had to do was show up for the TV and the pay-per-view.
Pretty good gig.
Yeah. I mean, for 3 years, I get paid. So
not bad at all. And we are going to continue having fun here on the show next week as we are going to do another edition of Ask Ted Anything. Candidly, as this podcast drops on Friday the 16th, that is the due date for my wife to give birth to our daughter. But who knows when this little critter is gonna show up? So it might be Monday, might be a week later.
It's just so everybody knows. I mean, if something unforeseen happens, then we'll just see you whenever we see you.
That's right.
Yeah.
One way or the other, we'll get you something. It might be a compilation episode if I'm in the hospital and we can't record or whatever's going on. We'll figure something out. But rest assured, we will be back in action with Ask Ted Anything in the coming weeks, whether it's next week or the week after. Look, before we go, I need to remind everyone to get over to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@everybody's-got-a-pod. Go and get subscribed. Ted and I have a lot of short clips over there, including YouTube exclusive clips we release every week with stories that you don't get to hear on the show. So if you love the show and you love what we're doing, obviously, if you're listening to this, that's a fact, then you're missing out on some stories. Get over to youtube.com/@everybody's-got-a-pod and get subscribed. Also, I've mentioned it. The Hacksaw Hour is rocking and rolling. And as you're listening to this, we just released a new episode yesterday with Jim talking about his rivalry with Yokozuna in the WWF in 1993 and the Knockdown Challenge segment where poor Jim was crushed by Yoko. So seriously, if you're not subscribed over there on YouTube, you're missing some really great stuff. Again, one more time, youtube.com/@everybody's-got-a-pod. Follow Ted on social media at MDM Ted DiBiase on all platforms. Follow me at Marcus P. D'Angelo on X, and follow the podcast at Ted DiBiase Pod on all social media platforms. Ted, I love looking back to the NWO days and WCW. It was a short period of time in your career, but holy smokes, man, the product was red hot, and you were right in the thick of the action.
Oh gosh, it was crazy. Hey, and tell my buddy Jim that I send my best. And just remind him that everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man.
I'll give Jim your best, and we'll see you guys next week right here on Everybody's Got a Pod.